Hi everyone, welcome to Academia once again. And in our today's lesson, we are going to deal or learn about MATLAB Programming. So what should we expect in our lesson for this day? So basically, here we would be able to write programs that contains logic and flow controls. With that being said, we are going to deal with um, some controlled statements. Okay. Then next is some conditional statements. If you have a background in programming, these conditional statements are what's called the if, else if, and else conditions. Okay, then some loop controls. So this is the for and while loop. Okay, then lastly, I'm sorry. So program terminations. So this contains end, break, and continue. Then lastly, would be able to try to incorporate this and deploy some working working systems. Okay, so just a rundown on some MATLAB syntaxes or MATLAB language syntax. Okay, so for the else if and else, okay, let me just copy this. So basically, these are statements that execute or execute statements if it is true. Okay, so um, ang ibig sabihin naman dito na true, hindi naman ibig sabihin na paano pag nag-false. Ang ibig sabihin niya, if what's inside the condition is true or satisfied, then i-execute niya yung statement which was assigned to the condition. Okay, so the true could be the false and the false could be the true. But what this means that the statement or the condition, if it is true, regardless of it is false, then the statement below that condition will be executed. Okay. Then next is for switch, case, and otherwise. Okay. So what does this do? So this executes one of several groups of statements. So what does that mean? So, and if you are aware, or for the people who are not aware, so basically the difference between the if, else, if, and else and switch case otherwise is that if, else, if executes line by line, or when you try to debug or analyze the controlled statement or the conditional statement, it goes line by line. So it has an hierarchy. So for example, so let me do this. So for example, I have here 5 lines, okay? And each line has a if condition, or for just a spoiler, so let's just use else if. Okay, then lastly the else. So to differentiate these two, okay, so basically if, or the conditional statements if, else if, goes line by line. So what do I mean by that? So for example, here at 1, in the first condition, the statement or the condition was satisfied. So basically, hindi niya na ito itutuloy. Okay. So after he met this, or after this statement becomes true, then it would automatically execute the statement. Okay, and it would bypass the remaining conditions or remaining conditional statements and then skip to the end line, so to the termination. Okay, so what's the difference that between switch and case? So switches and cases, unlike the if else if condition, it goes or it checks it simultaneously. Then to whatever um, condition it satisfies, then it would produce one or two outputs. Kaya ang sabi dito, it executes one of several groups of statements. Sabihin, I could have one or greater than one statements. Statements. Okay, so I hope that's clear to everyone. Okay, so moving on. So what is next? So our loop conditions. Loop controls. I'm sorry, not conditions. Loop controls. Okay. So what does loop controls are, or what are those? So that is our for and while. So these are the basics, for and while loop. Okay. So basically for loop, it repeats specified number of times. So for example, 1 to 10. Okay. So basically for loop, for loop, it repeats the statement, or it iterates, what we call iteration, with the given or the specified number of times. So basically this would iterate from 1 to 10. So it's like counting 1 to 10. Okay. And for while loop, while loop is just a loop that repeats whenever the condition is true. Okay. So for our terminations, we have the end, break, continue, and pause. Pause is not technically a termination, but it pauses your system or your MATLAB for a while, depending on the time you want to show the inputs or give a break to your commands. So pause is what we use. Okay, so without further ado, let's go to our first lesson, which is the conditional statements. So in our conditional statements, we are going to deal with the if, else if, and else conditions. Okay, so without it's better to do this with an example. So let's try to do an example. So let's just try to call a random variable a with or containing values of random numbers. Let's say 10 numbers. Okay, between 0 to 1. Okay, there we go. So what we created here is a column vector. So ibig sabihin, column vector, which is meaning we only have one column and multiple rows. So that is a column vector. So here in the column vector, we created 10 numbers or 10 random numbers, all being less than or equal to 1, while being greater than or equal to 0. So you would think, bakit walang 1 or 0? So basically, this is in 4 decimal places. So the odds of landing 0 and 1 is pretty high, pretty low, unlike these random decimal numbers. Anyways, so let's just say, for example, I would create a limit. Okay, limit being equal to 0.5. Okay, so what I want to do here is basically test if there are if there are any results that are true using the if function, as well as I'll introduce the any command or function. Okay, so basically, to explain it further, so I would create a conditional statement that if any of these values in A is greater than my limit, okay, so ibig sabihin, etong column vector ko, i-check niya isa-isa if meron ba diyang kahit isa lang na naging greater than sa limit natin na 0.5. So this is our first condition. Okay? Just a tip of reminder. Okay, when you write a conditional statement, or loop controls, you will not put any semicolon or anything after that. So that would pose an error in your program. So just be strict with your or logic. Just create your logic, then that's it. Then press enter, then move to the statement. So remember, in programming, or in here in MATLAB reads line by line. So if after it reads this line, it would go down to the next line. So in our conditional statements, the first line would always be the condition, the conditional statement. Then the next line would be the, I'm sorry, the next line is the statement. Okay, the statement could go on and on. I mean, multiple statements. Like for example, you create a equation beneath that, or formula beneath your condition. That's fine, but conditional statements should only consist of one line. So one condition, one line. But for the statement, it could go one or many. Okay, so let's just do a statement. So what could be my statement? So for example, after the condition that if any of A being greater than the limit, then I would pose a statement that there is at least one value above the limit, or the defined limit. Okay, I'll just put semicolon here. Then else. So for now, we are just going to do two conditional statements. So if and then else. Then display all values are below the defined limit. Then we would end this one. Okay, so as you can see, after we press end, automatically the system displayed this statement. So why? Um, since if you would look at our column vector, you would see that there are numbers that are greater than 0.5. Okay, so what this conditional statement did is it checked each line if there's any of them have passed the limit 0.5, okay, which is true on the very first row. Okay, so automatically it would present um, this statement that there is at least one value above the defined limit. So ibig sabihin at least one, ibig sabihin there could be not just one, two or more, and whatsoever. Okay? So if you would ask, bakit si else walang condition? Okay? Actually, else already has a condition. So ano yung condition ni else? So the condition of else is whatever hindi sakop ni condition ni if, si else ang sasalo. So anything na wala or anything na hindi kasama sa condition on any control or on any conditional statement, si else ang sasalo. So just to give that an example, let's just say create a change our limit to 1. Okay? Then I'll just copy this. Okay. Then press enter. So all values are below the defined limit. So ibig sabihin, si 1, limit natin is 1. Okay? So if n is a is greater than 1, which obviously wala, so i-skip itong state condition and statement na ito. Then you would proceed to the else automatically. Then whatever na nakalagay kay else, siya yung magiging statement natin. Okay? Okay. Okay. Continuing to our lesson. So basically after that, we should try the else if. So para kanino ba sa else if? So basically else if is a an additional statement. Okay. So basically see if else is for only two statements. So else if would house a third statement. Okay. So basically ipapasok natin siya in between if kay else. So yun si else if. So just an example to else if. Okay, so I'll just create a space. So let's say x is equal to 10. Then minimum value would be 2. Then max would be, let's say, 6. Sorry, hindi ko nilagyan ng semicolon. Anyways, so let's create a statement. So if x is greater than or equal our mean value and, okay, so pag maglalagay ka ng condition or ng logical operator sa ating statement or conditional statement, like what we have discussed earlier on our previous lessons. So always 2. So basically this is the ampersand. So this entails or this says to the program the end logic. Okay. So let's say and x is less than or equal the max value. Okay, so enter. So here we will display that the value within the or value within the specific or the specified range. Let's put a period on that. Okay. Then else if, okay, ito natin tatry si else if x is greater than max or the max value, then display is value or the value exceeds the maximum value or maximum range. No, that should be value. Okay. Then lastly, for the else, so sabi ko nga, hindi mo na kailangang maglagay ng statement kay else. Anything na hindi kasama sa statement, then it would be the else na ang sasalo. Then, obviously, since meron tayong specified range, meaning in between, and we have the maximum, then most probably this should be value is below the minimum value. Okay. Okay, then we end. Okay. So, the value exceeds the maximum value. Bakit? Ano bang value ni x natin? Our x is 10. is basically greater than 6. So automatically, sa second statement siya papasok. So ibig sabihin that the first one, nag-fail siya. Since sabi nga dito, x is greater than or equal the mean value, ibig sabihin it's from 2 and to 6. So ibig sabihin dalawa yung sinasatisfy nating condition sa first if condition natin. So here, it should meet this both. So di ba nga ang logic operator ng AND is that if you would use a truth table, okay, okay. So see, this is 0, 0, 1, 0. Ibig sabihin, kailangan masatisfy ang both conditions, x and y, to produce a logic value of 1. Okay? So, but nung second statement or second condition, else if is x greater than the max, then satisfy niya. So, siya yung lumabas. Okay? Let's try assigning another value. So, let's just say x is equal to 4, which is basically in between 2 and 6. Okay? Then copy lang ulit natin yung condition. Then value is within the specified range. Okay? So let's try below 1. Okay, then copy ulit. So value is below the minimum value. So like what I've said kanina, hindi naman talaga tayo naglagay ng value kay else or condition kay else, pero automatically na-adapt niya um, yung logic or yung conditional statement. Ibig sabihin, nag-fail na yung dalawang to, then siya na yung last resort or siya na yung last na condition na siya automatically yung magbibigay ng statement. Okay? Pwede namang walang statement. It depends on your logic on your project. Okay? It depende siya. Okay? So I hope this is clear to you. So I would suggest na you practice this on your own. Try to navigate yourselves trying this else if, and else conditions. Okay? So next, we should move on to the switch cases. Okay? Okay. So sabi ko kanina, ano ang difference ni if-else um, kay switch cases? So sabi ko, let me just clear this first. Okay. So basically, switch case otherwise are are parallel conditions. Ibig sabihin, they run simultaneously. The conditions, or I mean, the checking of the conditions are run simultaneously. So the switch here would be is the evaluation of the expressions. Okay, so ibig sabihin, siya yung mag-hold ng information. Then the cases would be the next conditions to sila yung magiging conditional statement mo. Then below the cases are the execution of the statements. Okay, so let's just try to create an example. So for example, let's have here n input a number. Okay, so let's enter a number. Let's say 12. Okay. Okay. So I'm just preparing you for our programming later and creating of functions. So switch n. Let's just say case. So for example, -1. If the case is -1, anong dapat? So display. I'm sorry, this should be -n. Okay, let me redo this. Okay, so switch case Otherwise, and then what I've said kanina, um, n is equal to input, enter a number. Okay? So, sabihin natin, pilitan na lang natin 2. Okay? So, using the switch, so switch n, sabihin, si switch, gagamitin natin si switch for n, or kung ano mang value na meron kay n, then siya yung magiging switch natin. Okay? So, let's try the case n, or negative n, then display negative value, negative number. Okay, then another case 0, then display 0 value. Okay, then lastly case n, which is meaning positive, then display positive value. Okay, then otherwise other number. I doubt that this otherwise would appear, but just for the sake of argument, yeah, so positive value. So let's try to change the number of n. Let's say negative 1,000. Yan. Copy natin ulit the switch case. Oh, nag-negative. Bakit? Our n is, so ba't siya nag-positive value? Oh, I'm sorry. May mali sa aking cases. Kasi case n, so ang kukunin niya si n. Okay, so hindi dapat yan. Okay, I'm sorry. So, dapat ganito ang switch natin. Sorry. So, switch n is our case should be n less than 0. So, that is our negative value. I'm very, very sorry. Okay. Then, another case is n being equal to 0. Then, that should be our 0 value. Then another case is that n being greater than 0, then siya yung positive value, and then otherwise. So other number. So bakit siya nag-other number naman? When our n is satisfied less than 0, it should be a negative number. So I think let's try. Let's try creating a or declaring another value. Let's just try 0. Okay, and let's copy this. 0 negative number. Why is that? Switch n. Oh, okay, I understand now. So what we should do is that we should not switch the variable, but switch the condition. So switch true. Okay, then let me just copy this bunch. Then, okay, 0 value. So ano ba yung nangyari? What happens here? So basically, the switch condition is not a recommended conditional value because it poses a lot of error, or it triggers errors. So basically, what I did here is the switch true. So for example, whatever that satisfies the conditions for the cases, then it would switch the true, or ibig sabihin, kung sino dito yung tama, then that would impose the true value. So if nag-true, then ilalabas niya yung statement. So let's try. Let's try the input a number. So n is equal to -1. Then try this again. Okay, negative number. There we go. So just to be sure, if lalabas si positive number, okay, positive value. So those are it. So what if kunwari n is equal to a? Yeah. So anong lalabas? Positive value. So hindi niya na consider. But however, since a is a char, and in terms, and you convert it to integer, it has a positive value. Okay, so ASCII value niya is positive. So that could be the reason kaya positive value din si a. Okay. However, so if you are confused, you can try to search it. But like what I've said, so switch is true. Ito dapat. So true value. Ibig sabihin, kung sino yung magtutrue sa statement mo. Yun yung i-switch niya for every cases. Okay? So without further ado, I'm not going to dwell on this much because, like what I've said, some programmers find switch as risky, and they do not recommend it. So mas important pa rin si if, okay, on the assumption, because unlike this, ang switch, it does simultaneous. So parallel. So it would consume a lot of your RAM or processing power. While unlike if, for example, na-meet niya na yung one statement, hindi na siya pupunta sa ibang statements. So that would save you a lot of time. Cases switch on the other hand would check it line by line. So lahat papadaanan niya. So that would take time. Most especially if madami na yung statements mo or yung cases mo, as also with your statements. Okay. So now let's move to for loops. Okay. So I will just clear this. So for loops, or for our loop conditions or loop controls. Yeah. So loop controls are basically the most helpful for me, on my opinion, on programming, most especially on sciences and checking for data values, etc. So this is much helpful for everyone. Okay, let's start with for loop. So I would go right into the example already. Okay, so let's just say we have here value a variable x. Let's create a vector. I'm sorry, a row vector. Okay, which contains ones. Okay, so 10 column vectors, 10 values, or 10 number of ones of a row vector. Okay, so how do we execute for loops? So for example, for loops is, sabi ko nga kanina, it's a control statement, loop control statement, that can repeatedly execute a block of code. So ibig sabihin, umiikot siya. Okay? Depending on the values na, or depending sa in-input mo value. Okay? So let's just say, for example, for n is equal 1 to 6. Yan. Okay, then let's say x sub n is equal to 2 times. Okay, xn minus 1. Then let's try ending this. I'm sorry, array indices must be positive. Okay. So hindi siya pwede y because of this. So let's just convert this to n. Okay, let me copy this again. Okay, so yun. So we would check n x. So that became 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 1, 1, 1. So what happened is it started with n is equal to 1. Okay, so if you may ask, ano ibig sabihin nitong function na to sa left-hand side? So basically, x parentheses, katulad ng our lesson on matrices or and vectors. Basically, the parentheses entails the position of your the value inside the matrix. So basically, x1 here is the first column in your raw vector. Basically, that's 2. Okay? Then, so ibig sabihin, the iteration here, okay, ang sinet natin is 1 to 6. So ibig sabihin, this equation, x sub n is equal to 2 times x sub n, would run or would loop or iterate 6 times. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Because yun yung predefined value mo or nilagay mong value or the number of repetitions that would incorporate your for loop control. Okay? So, ibig sabihin, yung in our left-hand side of the equation, here x sub x parenthesis n, since yung n mo nagbabago from 1 to 6, nagbabago din yung position ng ino-call mong value. So parang ano yun eh. So for our first iteration, it is at x1, okay, is equal to 2 times the previous value, the current value of that x sub n. Yeah. So basically, since pare silang 1, so 1 din siya. Okay? So if you would look at the value, if you would look at your workspace, naging 8 na siya. Bakit? Initially, it was 2. Okay? Then, minultiply ko sa 4, naging 8 siya. So, ganun nangyari sa sequence nung nag-iterate yung for loop mo dito. So, until ma-reach niya yung 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Tignan mo. Pagdating sa 6, nag-stop na yung loop. So, 7, 8, 9, 10 remained as 1. Hindi sila kasama sa iteration mo. Okay? So, yun yung power ni for loop. Okay? Maraming applications si for loop, but yun nga, these are just examples on what can for loop do. Okay? So, you can use this for loop to read data, read numbers, etc. So, there are various of applications that you can use for loop. So let's try another one. So let's create a matrix for A. I'm sorry, it's just A is equal to 3 zeros naman. 1 to 10. Yeah. And puro 0. So let's just say let's create another variable, 1 to 10. Okay. So that is A sub 1. A sub n is equal to 2 plus x sub n. X sub n. Sorry, that should be n. Okay. Then try to n. So anong ginawa ko dito? So si m is a new variable. So siya yung magiging host ng loop ko. So am 2 plus x sub n. So ibig sabihin, since may initial value tayo ng x, which is right here, Yan. So, same yung dimensions dapat ni x tsaka ni a. Okay? So, ibig sabihin, pagka-iterate ko sa first, so a1, meaning the first column, and first column din ni a tsaka ni x. So, ibig sabihin, yung value ni x sa first column, kukunin niya, i-add niya sa 2, then ilalagay niya sa first column ni a. Ito yun. Then, repeatedly, mangyayari yun. So, 2, 2, 2, 2, so nag-plus 2, plus 2, plus 2, plus 2, plus 2, plus 2, plus 2. So, na-complete niya kasi 10 yung statement, ay 10 yung iteration natin. Okay? So, what if kunyari, nilagpasan mo yung given na iteration. So, mag-i-exceed ka. Magkakaroon ka ng error. Okay? So, be careful with that. There might be errors that you will encounter on your problems. So, better check to examine mo na yung logic. So, as a coder, so ang ginagawa ko tentatively is I try to imagine and write it down muna. So, pagdating sa command or sa pag-write ko ng code, then application ko lang. So, it all starts with your logic on what or kung anong gusto mo mangyari sa ginagawa mo on or your project. Then after that, try to write it down, try to analyze before actually inputting it on your program. Okay? So now let's try to the while loop. Okay. So while loop, unlike our for loops, so sabi ko kanina, while loop is set to repeat whenever the condition is true. So let's try this. So let me clear this first. Okay. While loop. Okay. So let's say n is equal to 10, f is equal to n, then while n is greater than 1, then n is equal to n minus 1, f equals to f times 10, then end. Okay. So ano nangyari? Okay, let's analyze. So at first n is greater than 1. So that's true. So n minus 1. So here, nagbawas si n. Naging 9 na. Okay? So then, after that, pag-proceed siya sa f, meaning yung value ni f, mag-multiply siya sa initial, which is yung 10, multiplied by 9, kaya 9. Okay? Dito, naging 9 si n sa una. Then here, nag-multiply siya sa 10, which is because f is equal to 10. Si f, kuha niya yung unang initial value ni 10. So, nag-multiply siya ng 10, kaya naging 90. Then, on the next, since n is equal to 9, so your while loop is still true, iikot siya. Then, magiging 8, multiply naman to sa 8, 720, and so on and so forth. Then, dumating yung time na si n natin is equal to 1. And since 1 is, this is not true, okay, this should be equal, then nag-terminate na yung process natin. So, ilan ba dapat yun? So, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. So, 2, 4, 6, 8, 9. 2, 4, 6, 8, 9. Okay? So, may 9 lang tayo na answers. Kasi, doon na nag-cut off. So, 1, hindi niya na na-read kasi hindi na siya. So ayun. So that is an example of the while loop. So ibig sabihin, um, whenever the condition is true, continuous lang siya. It will not end. But when the condition fails or yung condition niya nag-false, automatically mag-end na si while. Okay? So, so far ay barely or hindi lagi ko siyang nakikita. I mean, nagagamit. I am more of a for loop person. Okay? I just managed to um, use some depending on the situation. So sabi ko nga, it's better to check if kailan mas magiging effective si while loop, kailan mas magiging okay si for loop. It depends on the nature of your program. Okay? Okay, so now we could continue. So let's try to do what we call a nested loop control. So what is a nested loop control? So basically, a nested loop control, okay, is adding a loop control inside our loop control. So how would we do that by an example? Okay, so for example, um, let's create this first for loop. So for example, I create a for loop for I is equal to 1 to 10. Okay, then automatically after creating that um, loop control, I would create another loop control inside it. So for j is equal to 1 to 5. Okay, there we go. So next, we could create a matrix. Okay, so basically, one of the applications of this nested loop control is to create a matrix using for loops or loop controls. So perhaps you can research or search for another applications that would, if this could be useful in your projects or homeworks. So basically here, what I'm going to do is create a array. Okay, let's just call array or perhaps my array, having the I as the row and j as my column. Okay, and then I would create the value or place in each cell of my matrix this value I plus j. Okay, you can explore. So basically, after ending this and checking my array, so I'll have a 10 by 5 matrix. Why is that? So basically, what I set for I is a matrix 1 to 10. So since the I represented my row, so if I would check the length of my I or the value of I have 10. So basically that is my row and j being my column. Okay. So if you would look here at my variables from our workspace, you would be able to look, okay, that it created a matrix using the nested for loops. So what happened here is that, for example, if you would examine here, okay, let me just make this a little bit bigger. Okay, so looking here, so for my first iteration, when I is equal to 1, after that, it would go next line, then j is equal to 1. So that would indicate after that j, after that for loop condition, it would go creating my matrix. So since I have an I equal to 1 and j equal to 1, then I would be on my matrix on slot 1 or row 1, column 1, which is or has the value of I plus j. So basically, my I is 1, my j is 1. So basically, it would give me a value of 2 at my 1, I mean 1, 1 matrix, or the cell 1, 1. Okay. So okay, after that, automatically, since the program entered this condition or this loop control, it will tend to finish this loop control before going out to the I, or the first nested loop control. So after that, since after this j reaches 5, then it will end, then it will go back to I being 2. So if you would look at here, so 2 plus 3 plus, I'm sorry, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's basically iterating since I is constant. So basically J is the one who is moving. So 1, so 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on and so forth. So after it moves back to the 4, to the I, or the first loop control condition, and reaches 2, then my array shifted from row 2 then back to column 1. So basically, that's what happened when you're using a nested loop control. So this is one of the applications. So in my years of programming, I've created such nested loops to calculate various of equations, as well as calculate based on these conditions. Okay, you can use it for months to days. Okay, then so on and so forth. Okay, so this is just one of the examples. So you can also use the if. We also have the nested if else if conditions, which are applicable also. Like for example, um, let's say here, let me just clear this. Let me just give this quick of an example. So let's say a is equal to 1. Okay, then I created an if. Okay, so for example, if a, okay, so I want to create a control statement that determines whether the input is a number or integer, or if it is a character or a string. So basically, and then within that if condition, I would determine, for example, for the integer, if it is a positive, negative, or zero value. Then for the string or the character, if it contains um, if the letter is a big number, I'm sorry, is in uppercase or in lowercase. So let's just try this one. Okay, so basically there's a command in MATLAB to check whether the variable contains a numeric data. So if so the command there, or the function, is numeric. Okay, there we go. Then inside it, I would love to check if it is positive. So is there another command? Well, you don't have to. You just check if a is greater than 0. Okay, then there you could create a statement display the number, or the numeric data is positive. Okay, just put this. Then if also, I'm sorry, so else if, since we want to check if it's positive, negative, or 0, so it basically it contains two or more conditions. So when you have two or more conditions, you may introduce, or you should introduce, else if. So else if a is less than 0. So meaning this is a negative value. So display the number, or the numeric data is negative. Okay. So else if again. So a is equal to 0. So display the numeric data is 0. Okay, I hope you can follow. Then for my lastly else, I would just say that the numeric data is a complex number. So this is just a handler for example, I have a complex number. So since basically I've much covered here the real numbers, so positive, negative, and 0, then my else condition would be just for the case of complex numbers. Okay, so I would end this. Okay, so if you would notice, technically it still hasn't ended. The whole condition has not ended because we have created two if conditions. So basically my end here just have only ended the initial or this controlled statement. So like what I've said earlier, I would like to create two main controlled statements that would house the numeric data, and the other would house if it is a string value. Okay, so I would write else if. Okay, so now I want to know if this is a character. Okay, so basically there's a command where you can just negate the is numeric. So let me try if this works. Okay, so somewhat it enters, so it works, it somewhat works. So what my statement here is to check if A is not numeric. So that could give me a lot of options. So it could be a string, it could be a character, and whatsoever. So since I'm only concerned on two things, which is um, if it is a character or a um, string, so there's a command where we can check that is char a, okay, then we could display the um, the variable contains a character or is a character type. Or I'm just gonna say this: the variable contains a character, or the variable is a character. Okay. Then else if is string a. So this is for the handling of is string. So here we would display the variable is a string. Okay. Then lastly the else, then other type of non-numeric data. Okay. So ending this, then so I have if and else if. So I would end this with an else condition saying that the data or the variable is not a numeric data or a or I'm sorry, the variable is not numeric, character, or a string. Okay, so ending this, the numeric data is positive. Okay, so basically since my a here is 1, so it is positive number. So let's try changing it to -1. Then let me just copy the whole of this. Okay, the numeric data is negative. So basically, it entered here. Then after it entered this first condition, it checked inside it if whether there are numbers inside it. So let's try a character. Trial. Okay. So my A here is a character. So let's try checking it here. Okay, the variable is a character. So trying a string, trial 2. Okay, then copy again. The variable is string. Okay. So that is for nested if condition. So you can try creating a nested or combining the if condition, while condition, and the loop controls or for loop controls with the if. So it will be up to you to discover and try to implement the concept to your programming. So that would be all for today. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time.